Welcome everyone to Web3SecurityClan's podcast. We are a group of junior security researchers dedicated to learn together. In this podcast, our host Nadir will interview many from CyberSecFree. We will talk about how to stand out in the space and the perspective of junior auditors in breaking through. Enjoy!
Hey, how are you, Manny?
I'm good. How are you?
I'm doing good. Thank you for joining us. This is it's actually our first talk here at the Web3SecurityClan.
Awesome.
And
Right. Well,
so welcome. I'll get my camera on as well here. Just give me a sec. There we go. Got my cat in the background. Nice to meet you, Manny. So my name is Nadir, and welcome to our community. Welcome to our talk. We're trying to record at least the audio here so that people can benefit from this discussion later. So very quickly, our group is basically a peer learning community for Web3 security researchers and auditors, and we have been a group for almost a little over a year now, I would say. And we have people, as you'd expect from, across the world. We keep it very small so that everyone contributes and stays motivated, and, it's not just this massive chat. And myself, I'm sort of leading and organizing the group, and I've been in Web3 security for also about a year and a half now, more or less. So it's a little bit about us. We're very happy to have you join us. So for those listening, Manny is, a crypto OG, from what I understand. Has been in the space for quite some time, and is the founder of Cyber3Sec, which is a Web3 security recruitment firm. So welcome, Manny. How's it going?
Thank you very much. I'm very well, and thanks for inviting me. Really excited for today's talk.
Yeah, definitely. So Manny, you've seen it all in crypto. I mean, tell me just a little bit about your journey, kind of so far.
Yeah, I mean, just to echo your thoughts, I got into crypto back in early to mid 2013. So my journey, like most people at that time, wasn't a journey of, wanting to become rich quick, was just really interested in the tech. I remember my brother came home one day with two really big tower computers, and then noticed he had them on like 24/7 for the next couple of weeks. And then just curiosity asked me, like, what is this doing? And he was like, hey, we're mining Bitcoin. And I was like, well, how much is this making? And he was like, maybe about $1 a day or something. And I was like, is it really worth the noise and the heat to mine, $60 a month between the two of them? And yeah, one thing led to another. Just really got curious into this. By around about May, June of that year, we'd already had a bull run up to $230, I think, in the April. And then I think that's what really kind of kickstarted my interest, is like, well, what is this stuff that you're mining, and how can I get involved? So cutting a long story short, kind of been full-time crypto pretty much ever since. Around 2020, I, like most people who've been in this space for a few years, kind of realized that, don't want to go through the ups and downs of being rich in a bull market and being, homeless and destitute in a bear market. So wanted to really kind of land a job in this space.
Right.
And I think, like most people, really didn't know where to start, what I could do. Most people tend to think that you need to come from a tech background. So cutting a long story short, started applying for jobs. Initially didn't really get much success. So one of the routes I took was to just reach out to founders directly, get them on a podcast to talk about their company, what they look for in hiring and everything else when they're growing the team. And one thing led to another, and eventually just started up my own recruitment firm, connecting people in my network who are looking for jobs, but then also, working with founders of early stage and established protocols, platforms, exchanges to connect people within my network that fit what they're looking for. So really long-winded story, but I guess that's my journey in Web3 over the last 5 years. Been recruiting in many different sectors, and then around about a year ago, I thought to myself, if there's one vertical in this space that really makes a big impact more than anything else, it's Web3 security. And from a personal point of view, I've been through many exchange hacks in that time for the last, 12 years. We have a running joke in this space. If you haven't been hacked in crypto, you haven't been here long enough.
Yeah.
And I guess that's one of the reasons that I have such a big passion for cybersecurity and Web3 is, at the end of the day, this is people's money that's been invested into a platform, an exchange, a protocol, many different things. And inevitably, two things happen when an exchange or a protocol is hacked. One is the investor's money is pretty much gone. There's no, recourse to those funds. And secondly, that project is pretty much dead on its feet at that point because nobody's going to trust it anymore and they're not going to have any more revenue coming in. So, the reason I set up CyberSec Free was to really help companies hire security teams, but also, I know that this is a long-lasting career for people in Web3 once they get into Web3 CyberSec. Unlike many other areas of the industry where when we do have a bear market and job losses and layoffs are made, I've seen a trend in Web3 CyberSec. It's a lot less and it's a lot more robust compared to other areas of the industry like product marketing, community, things like that. So really long-winded answer, but hopefully that gives your guests an insight into like who I am, what I do, potentially like how I can help you and your community for the next year.
No, I appreciate. I mean, there's no time limit on your answers. I mean, we have as long as you're willing to give us. So I really appreciated hearing that story, and I think it's especially interesting because I don't know. I don't know about you, but I feel like these days when I look around the space, people seem a lot younger. You have a lot of teenagers or people some people are skipping university and becoming very successful in the auditing space at a young age. Most of them living in Eastern Europe. I don't know what's in the water there, but so I think it's great that you have that experience. You have a lot more experience than most people would, right? So that's super cool. I also think you're the only recruitment firm in security that I personally know of. I mean, I could be wrong. Is that the case?
100%. I mean, the reason I chose this space was, as I mentioned, I'm passionate about cybersec, but then, there's not many other recruitment agencies who are interested in cybersecurity. Typically they work on every different role, and I really wanted to niche down and be the specialist in my space. So as far as I know, CyberSec Free is the only Web3 recruitment firm dedicated to just hiring with cybersecurity space.
Okay, I mean, that's amazing. I like you. I mean, I get some messages from people, other juniors, some people more junior than me, who ask for advice, who are kind of trying to figure out what the roadmap is, how they can get into a job or internship or etc. So the need is 100% there. So you're ahead of the curve. We have a bunch of questions from our guests here, but I'll ask a few of mine first. Having the privilege of being the host today, I guess the question is sort of like, let's say someone walks in or hits you up on message. It's a prospective auditor who's looking for a role. What happens next? What can they expect when they meet with you? What is sort of the experience, the steps that will take place after they kind of come into contact with you guys?
It's a great question. I mean, typically we will always kind of determine what the person is looking for. We do have people who are looking for a full-time role to maybe replace them working as a solo auditor or working on bug bounties. We do have people who are looking for, additional income, so maybe part-time or private audit. So typically, the first thing we do is identify like what that person is looking for and what fits best for them. And then moving on from that, really identify, what type of code base they'd like to work with, whether that's Solidity, Rust, Move, Cairo. There's so many evolving elements in Web3. And then following on from that, we typically tend to connect them with auditing firms that we have a partnership with, if that's the role that they're looking for. We do have auditors that come in and say, hey, I'm looking for more of a, change in this space. I may be looking to get into DevSecOps. I may be looking to get into pen testing. So really identifying what the person is looking for in terms of what fits for them and the type of role. And then following on from that, we'll usually connect them with either an audit firm, if that's the type of role they're looking for, or alternatively connect them with our network of hiring managers within like protocols, infrastructure, exchanges, etc. And then moving forward from that, our role is to kind of give them the best chance of landing a job. So we work with them to improve their resume, look at their social presence, and then also, when going through an interview process with a company, if we do have a connection at the place that they're applying for, we'll give them an insight into typically what sort of culture fit also works within the company as well, and what the interview process is like.
Okay, interesting. And on the other side, I guess the employer side, what does that network sort of look like? Are you kind of hooked into a couple of protocols and firms, or what should people expect in terms of I guess the access that you could provide?
Great question. I mean, typically, Web3 is an ever evolving space. A long time ago, the only businesses in this space were exchanges, and still to this day, they are the biggest and most established companies in the industry. So one of our biggest client bases is typically working with exchanges. Following on from that, infrastructure has grown massively since 2017 onwards. So, we work with a lot of infrastructure platforms as well. And then we also work with several layer one, layer two, layer three, even protocols, in different code bases. So, EVM, Rust, and others. And then finally, we do also work within the wallet ecosystem as well. So both hardware and online wallet. We do have a few clients that we work with there. So where I'm going with this is we cover pretty much most verticals within the space. Specifically when it comes to smart contract audits, we do work with several audit firms within the space, both established and newer, smaller boutique firms as well. I would love to name some of our clients, but we try and keep that confidential just until we go through the interview process and make sure that it's a good fit for the person who's looking to get their new role. But yeah, to answer your question, we cover pretty much every space. It really just then depends on what the person's looking for, and then we can connect you into the relevant people that are hiring for those roles.
Okay, excellent. My next question, I suppose, is relating to the readiness of a candidate, right? So I don't know if you've tried your hand at smart contract auditing yet. Maybe you have or maybe you haven't, but it's not easy. It's not easy. You're looking at all this code. If you're starting out, you don't know how to read it, and even then, you're not really sure what you're looking for. It takes a lot of hours, a lot of time to get a basic level of proficiency, and even then, then you start competing in contests and you realize, okay, there's 1,000 other people who are as good or probably better. So I find one of the challenges people I speak to, and even people in our group, is sometimes we don't know where we're at. Maybe I have a couple of decent contest scores. Maybe I have a small bounty that I found, or I did some nice research, or I did a small private audit, but I don't really know what that's worth yet because it's a bit opaque in this niche of our space. So if someone were to come to you and ask you, let's say a junior, where do I have to be, Mani, to break in? What would you tell them?
It's a great question. I mean, it really depends in the type of role they're looking for, the size of maybe the auditing company, what sort of code base they work on. But typically a good benchmark for this is I had some notes put together. Let me just quickly pull this up.
Sure.
Someone who's got a really strong presence really helps, first of all. So, as you know, the Web3 space is very transparent on Twitter. So I'm always a big advocate of, building in public, especially for smart contract auditors. I know typically the majority of people who post on Twitter when it comes to cybersec and specifically smart contract auditing, they just usually post a screenshot of the bounty they've received. But I always think if you can go, it's a norm, right? And I think that's great. But I think one thing that can really kind of take this to the next level and build a resume alongside this is actually talk about your journey from start to finish on that whole process.
Right.
Even better if you can document this in some sort of video content, because people in Web3, they don't really have the attention span to read 15, 20 tweet threads. But if you can put together like a 30 to 60-second video of what you did, how you achieved it, the end result, I think this is a great way for people to display what they've done. And in terms of as a barometer for this, you touched on a great point earlier. I am a smart contract auditor myself. I am going through the Cyphering course as we speak, so I do know how difficult this can be. But I think the underlying thing I always say with this is build in public, and you will get a gauge from the response you get from your peers within the industry as to how good or how well you're doing at that particular time. I think documenting your journey also works really well, because if you are following founders of audit firms and engaging with them, it's a sort of thing that you can share with them quite easily on Twitter. And maybe even YouTube is a great angle, because as far as I know, there is nobody documenting Web3 cybersec auditing on YouTube as of now. There are lots of courses around this. Obviously, everyone knows Patrick's course on Cyphering, but I haven't seen any Web3 auditors documenting their journey on Speaks. And I think this is a great starting point, because these things are time-stamped and they can't be edited maybe as much as things like Twitter or documents and reports you put together on your own. This is like hey, I started maybe, let's say, on the 1st of January of this year, and here's where I am on the 28th of August, and all those videos between.
Sure. Those are some great tips. I think one of the things that it reminds me of as well, in terms of my experience with this group, for example, is that the process of becoming an auditor, it's a lot of highs and lows. And so when you see someone's screenshot on Twitter, it's really just a tiny part of the journey. In fact, a lot of the journey is feeling confused or feeling lost, you know what I mean? And we talk about it a lot in our group, where sometimes someone's feeling a bit down because they just have a string of bad results, or just losing kind of morale. And so it's really a mentally tough, I think, process as well to go through. So that's a great tip about documenting in a bit more detailed way. So I have a couple of more questions here now from some of our group members. One question here from Strapontin is, any chance you could rank the languages in demand regarding offers for security audits?
It's a great point. I mean, Solidity is number one by far, and I think the reason for that is just the EVM dominance. We have seen a trend in particular over the last couple of months of, things like RWA coming into the space. So that will always be dominant when it comes to, building in Solidity. And, obviously the value of these contracts can be quite big as well. DeFi space will always still, is still and always will be dominated by Solidity and EVM projects, code bases as well. So Solidity by far, I think it's a great foundation to have. And then moving on from that, obviously we've seen growth in Rust, particularly with Solana. Now, my only kind of thing with this has been is, a lot of the growth in Solana over the like 9 to 12 months has mainly been fueled by meme coins. These are not the sort of projects that get any sort of auditing. So as much as I say learning Rust is great, I think, it will take time for things like DeFi, RWA to filter down into Solana. So, in order of preference, I would say Solidity number one, Rust number two. Now, we have seen some growth in Move and Cairo recently. Move specifically with Sui more than Aptos. Again, we will have to see like how things go with this. One thing I always suggest, and this is the thing I did with my recruitment agency, is start broad and then niche your way down as you get more experienced into the niches. And then once you're in that space, you can become a lead and someone who's seen as an authority within that particular sector. Move right now is really hot. Same with Cairo. I think in particular, Cairo was always for Starknet projects. Obviously, as we've seen the growth of ZK, we are seeing more and more demand for that as well. And I think one of the things that's often overlooked in the auditing space is a lot of people are going for bounties on platforms for smart contracts, which is great because, there is a lot of money in that niche. One of the areas that is really undertapped right now is actually auditing infrastructure protocols themselves internally. So one of the areas I've seen demand for auditing has specifically been within Golang.
Okay.
So, and Golang tends to be mainly used for infrastructure platforms. I'm thinking of, I don't want to name the client, but if you think of infrastructure, we see a lot of those built in Golang, and it is a really, really undertapped niche for auditing because this can be a full-on private audit. You don't have to compete for bug bounties in the public space. I think the only difficulty you have there is getting your foot in the door to actually get access to the code base to do an audit. But one of the things I always recommend is if you do one of these or two of these free in your own time to build up a portfolio, it's not actually too much different from spending time doing a contest and having no guarantee of payment at the end. And most companies are quite generous if you do found a bug in a closed source platform. They will give you a bounty for it, even if it's not advertised.
Okay. Interesting. Another one we have is, are there any surprisingly weird benchmarks that companies use to hire that we wouldn't think of? There seems to be many audit firms and solo private auditors as the space is saturated as it looks.
100%. I mean, we touched on this earlier. I think your Twitter presence is one of those underlying things that no company's going to say it on a job advertisement when they put a role out. But, the stronger presence you have on Twitter, the better it is because it works as a second or third resume when it comes to what they will decide as a difference between hiring candidate A, candidate B, and candidate C. So the stronger social brand and social presence you have on Twitter is really one of those quirky things. I mean, outside of cybersec, I remember one client I worked with, they would just hire people based on Twitter profiles alone. No resume,
Really?
very minimal interview, and it'd just be like, right, I know this guy from Twitter. Can you reach out to him, tell him that we want to hire him and get the ball rolling? So, it's one of the things in this industry that is very unique compared to any other space. Whereas maybe in traditional cybersec, it's the number of certificates you've got. In Web3, the equivalent is like, what's your presence on Twitter? How much have you been kind of documenting your journey along the way and what you're doing? So that would definitely be one. I think write-ups are another weird hiring filter as well. Also, particularly your clarity in write-ups, documenting that, having really good English, doing a workflow. Again, if you can do video documentation alongside written documentation, it's a really good thing to be able to share with companies that are hiring. And then I think, Discord activity, YouTube presence, I'm going to really kind of because, there is very, very...
No one's doing it.
No one's doing it, right? And I mean, look, there's three people in the chat today, yourself and Babs and Strapuntin. If I could say take away one thing from today's call, get your YouTube channel set up and just get on it. It doesn't have to be perfect. No one really cares what your accent sounds like. Doesn't matter, the stuff you're working on. Just get started today, because if you start before everyone else, it means that you have a huge lead. Just like the guys who are doing auditing in 2017. If you start a YouTube channel today, it will give you that same kind of edge over that newer batch of people who are coming in and just posting screenshots on Twitter.
True, it's a great point. I think I think part of it is, most auditors probably, like, if you take the stereotype, maybe not the most social or not the most willing to kind of go in front of a camera and like talk, which I understand. I mean, personally, I actually like that kind of thing, and that's one of the parts of the job that I find hard, is that sometimes I miss having more interaction, more communication. It's also why I started this group, because I felt like I was, grinding away at this stuff, and I would keep seeing the same names in the contests that I was doing, and I thought, oh, I've seen that guy before, I know who that is. And then I started just inviting them to the group and saying, hey, let's kind of do this a bit together, and that's been good for us so far. But Interesting. Okay, so a couple more questions here while we still have you. I mean, with all respect to your time, I mean, as long as we're good for you.
Of course, don't worry, I'm good for time.
So here we see a question here from Chris Renzo. He says, "How real is the problem of finding a good audit service for small, mid, large projects, considering we have well-established brands with a track record and accessible leaderboards?" So I think that's a little bit different than what you do, right? You don't really source firms for projects, right, as much, but
It's yeah, pretty much not what we do, but I think, to kind of touch on the question, if I'm getting this right, like, in terms of small audit firms, how do they stand out against maybe more established ones, the bigger
yeah,
brand names? Is that right?
yeah, fair enough. I guess is how is their experience in finding well, in terms of projects. So if you're a small, mid to large project, how hard is it to find a good audit service?
It's a good point. I mean, typically, audit services don't really differ too much, particularly depending on the brand name. I think, like with everything in life, if you're paying for something that's more established, well, if you're using someone who's more established, you are going to be paying more. Doesn't always guarantee that the service delivery is always going to be of a higher level. I think
Yeah.
the other side of it is with a brand new or lower, more recently established security firm, maybe he's got less staff. You may find that they may not have that same level of experience. But I think the pros and cons of both are smaller firms can deliver more of a boutique service. They rely on word of mouth, they rely on really good service, and also, they have smaller teams to manage as well. So, if someone reaches out and say, "Hey, I need an audit started tomorrow or within 2 days," more likely than not, a smaller firm is going to be able to take that work on because, they are not as stretched as maybe a larger firm. On the other side of things, larger firms may have experience specifically when it comes to, EVM, Rust, even Move and Cairo. They may have more capacity to put more auditors on. Doesn't always mean that they can deliver a quicker service. So there's pros and cons to both, really. I mean, I never recommend early stage startups to, choose any specific company. I think, as with anything in Web3, I always recommend on word of mouth. So, if they have someone in their network who's used someone previously, I always say refer back to them and get their feedback on what the service was. The
Right.
other way they can do this is actually post it on Twitter and see what feedback comes back. Now, obviously, if someone works for that company, they're going to say, yeah, they're best, but you may get someone who used them and, will give completely independent feedback as to, what their level of service was and what the outcome was as well.
Okay, wonderful. Okay, so I see. So Strap has a question. I can put the mic on if you want, Strap, or I can read it. The question, he says, okay. So the question is, how can I increase my chances to be a good fit for an offer? What are the key experiences and values that companies look for in security researchers?
Great question. I mean, typically, aside from having really good experience in, bug bounties and petitions, I did have a sheet here. Let me just quickly pull that up as like a benchmark. What someone advised me a while ago from auditing firms. Let me pull this up. Where are we? Right.
While you're pulling that up, I actually thought of another tip that I can share that one of our members actually shared with me a little while back. So after you're done, I'll share that.
Yeah, feel free. You.
So I guess just quickly. Well, I'll wait till you're done. I'll let you answer first,
Okay.
and then I'll jump in. Yeah, go for it.
Cool. So, I mean, they're always looking for people who have experience in obviously critical AI bugs. I think one thing that works really well is publicly documenting your earnings in any contest as well. I think a good benchmark is once you get over that 10 to 20K mark in earnings is a really good benchmark. Being a top 50 in a leaderboard, I think he mentioned to me was being top 50 in the C4 leaderboard. And then also having like a handful of strong public reports works really well. So I guess that's more from the technical side, but more from a personal side of things. I think, as I echoed before, having a really strong presence in Twitter, in Discord, on YouTube works really well. I think one of the things that's often overlooked for founders when they're hiring, and it comes out during the interview process, is a good culture fit as well. Someone who's quite open to learning, someone who is a team player is always super important, especially because we are working remotely, and someone who's quite flexible as well. So, someone who's willing to kind of work hours that are maybe not so social, get things done quite quickly, and also, someone who is curious and autonomous as well. I think they're the key things we look for, or companies look for hiring. Like curiosity and autonomy are the two number one traits, I think, from a personality point of view that get people hired in this space.
For sure.
Someone who's curious, someone who's going to learn off their own accord, but someone who's also autonomous as well, so doesn't need to be told every small thing in what to do. They just get stuff done, and if they can't figure it out or they don't know, they will take the time to figure it out themselves, maybe rather than 8 hours for their colleague to come online, their senior ask.
Yeah, 100%. I mean, so I had, Manny, if I can share a little bit too, I've had different careers in the past. I used to be a lawyer and a teacher, and I've kind of had nine different lives. And one principle I think that always helped me is, and someone told me many years ago, is this tip that, you want to be someone that people want to work with.
Right.
Right? You want to be someone that others enjoy working with. They don't have hesitations with you. They can come to you with issues, or if you're a junior as well. And I've told this to people I've mentored in the past that if you're a junior but a senior can see that you have the room to grow and that they can trust you with something, like if I can make you feel, Manny, like, okay, you can send me something and you know that I can figure it out. Even if I don't know it right off the bat, that there's that confidence that I'm someone that you could rely on to figure things out. That helps a lot. Being someone people want to work with, I've always found is super important. And I think even in my recent experience, I recently was accepted to the Sigma Prime internship, and a bit to my surprise, to be honest. and some of the feedback I got was that even though my technical skills are probably a bit lower than most others who are going for it, I'm able to communicate, or I'm able to work with others, or articulate certain thinking or findings, etc. And I would think that that's also quite important across audit firms. Is, can you communicate with the client? Can you communicate with a senior member or with a junior member, etc. So
100%. I mean, I really echo that point. Like, being a good people person gets you very far in life, but specifically within a career, and then more even specifically in Web3. We used to have one client we used to hire with, and he used to have a filter that said, "Don't be a dick." And he basically would kind of determine if, like, if the shit hit the fan or something's really urgent, as you said, could he rely on this person to do it, and would they not be a dick about it? Pardon my French, but someone who just basically gets shit done without expecting anything, or without giving an attitude in response, and expecting something as just part and parcel of doing their job. So I really echo those thoughts. Like, be a person who people want to engage with, want to be around. And to come back to the Twitter point, I think no one expects you to have a squeaky clean Twitter profile. But I think one thing I always recommend is try and keep it professional to a certain extent. So maybe try and limit engagements with people where you're argumentative, playing out rude. You can always have a dialogue with someone with positive elements without having to be nasty or be rude to anyone, because it's a small space, right? People talk.
Yeah, no, for sure. And I think it's, especially auditing, it's very, very niche. And but it's funny you mentioned that, because in our group we've been talking about this specifically lately, because in fact over a few months, where a couple of us, me included, feel that Twitter can be sometimes it feels like a net negative, as a junior auditor, let's say, like, I feel like I have to do it because I want to build a profile, a brand, a presence, like you've been saying. you want to stand out, etc. But if you're looking at it on breaks and then everyone is dunking on each other, and or you see people doing especially well, and then you feel, oh man, I must suck if this guy got a 100K score, or like Zichter posts a score of winning $400 billion, and you're just like, geez, So I think sometimes it's tough, and one of our members, Marco, he's a very, very sharp guy. He's actually quite far along in ZK security. He's already employed, in fact. He says that he barely uses Twitter, and he kind of suggests that he's like, guys, just use it for 10 minutes a week, and that's it. And I've always found when I'm in periods where I need to focus more, or push a little bit more, or really learn difficult concepts for a couple of weeks, let's say, and I take more distance from Twitter, I find it helps me a lot. So it's tough, It's like you want to be there, but at the same time, you don't want the toxicity, right?
I mean, I 100% resonate with this, and I think not just when it comes to security researching, it applies to the whole Web3 space as a whole. Back in the day, one of the things I used to really get affected by was people talking about how much money they've made and stack, and I'm minuscule in comparison. I think two things I took away from that, what really helped was everyone has their own journey. Identify what your goals are, compare them to other people's, because as long as you're on the path to meeting your goals, everything else is irrelevant. And I think the second thing which really will help people is, instead of looking at what other people are doing, if you take control of that narrative, talk about what you're doing, inevitably you will spend less time scrolling through feeds and thinking more about what you're doing and posting content. So it's a net positive in both elements, really. So coming back to what I said, trust me, if any of you guys start the video, when I say video, it doesn't have to be like using a phone to record yourself. It can just be using Loom to record your screen without even showing yourself. Sure. You may not even want to talk. Nowadays, you have AI that can put captions on these things and just make it short for you. So, the moment, I promise you guys, the moment you start focusing on posting about your own content, it will just alleviate any feelings of I'm left behind, or people are doing better than me. So I very much get it, and I think the only thing I would say to overcome that is just focus on your own journey.
Yeah, great tips. I mean, I really like this thread of kind of some less conventional ideas, and on that note, I wonder what you think of this. So a couple of months back, we had another coffee house session internally where we were meeting and we were just chatting, and I started to share my screen, and I was in an audit competition, and I kind of inadvertently, for about 10 or 15 minutes, started to kind of audit with my, some of my teammates here on the call. So we were doing kind of I don't know if you can call it a shadow audit, or maybe like a live audit, like a live action audit, where I'm auditing and explaining my thinking. And now and then someone is chiming in and saying, oh, look at that, or open that file. And it was really fun. It was really, really fun, actually. And I think we all kind of felt like, oh, this is cool. We've never approached auditing like that before. And it reminded me of a video I saw on YouTube, actually, like you mentioned, by I think a former auditor now. His name is Jackson Kelly. I actually purchased his course initially, which was super helpful when I started, and I got into contact with him and made a good connection with him, and on YouTube you can access a video where he has 15 minutes where he's doing a very simple audit of I forget what the project was, but he's basically going through it, and he says, this is how I start, and I do this, and I run Slither, and I look at these types of functions. These are the types of comments that I would make. He's basically auditing, but he's commentating his audit as he goes, but it's short. It's 10 minutes, 12 minutes. And I probably went back and watched that video 10 or 12 times in the first little while, because I found it so captivating. And I wonder, and I would love to do something like that, but I wonder, what do you think of that kind of tactic, let's say, in terms of resume building, or, putting your stuff out there?
100%. I mean, it's like I mentioned earlier, the quicker you can start on YouTube documenting this journey, the better it will be, because two things happen with this. First of all, people get to know your name quite quickly, so you're seen as an authority within the space, rather than just an avatar on Twitter or a user handle. And then secondly, inevitably, you will start getting better and better as you do more video. And at some point, people will start recognizing who you are. And I think where I'm going with this, at a certain point, there's a tipping point when you build a personal, when you go from a person who's applying for jobs to then being that person who companies reach out to do work for them. So, I would highly recommend it. And the third thing is, it keeps you accountable to a certain extent as well. If you say in your head, I want to do one YouTube video a week, it means that you're constantly auditing. So,
True.
you have no excuse then to slack off from work. So,
Yeah.
it's a good thing in many different ways.
Wonderful. These are great points, Manny. So, just checking here if you have any last questions before we maybe start to wrap up and let you go. I have a tricky question here. You ready for it?
Yeah, fire away.
So, why is there so little opportunity for juniors? That's a tough one. That's a
Great
tough
question. I mean, I speaking to a friend from an auditing firm literally 2 nights ago about this. I was like, hey, feed you in a pipeline of junior guys. And his response was, no, we don't really have time for that. To kind of give a really, definition on this, audit companies are paid quite handsomely. They're expected to do a turnover quite quickly. So for them, it's really high stakes with a low margin for error. Hence why they're reluctant to take on junior people. Now, that's not to say that they don't, but I think you really have to target the type of firm and you really have to display your ability to them before they will even open the door. So it may be a question of asking them for an internship, giving them some sort of work for free, or even just building a relationship with them, not asking for anything in return, and just providing value to them right in the beginning. They may not have a job for you, but they may have a founder in another audit firm, looking for someone. And, I recall a person I spoke to a couple of months ago. He was the first hire in an auditing firm as an intern. So
Okay.
there is opportunities for it. I think you've just got to be really kind of picky about the types of firms you want to apply for and be realistic. Let's say the top 3 or 5 auditing firms, right now they don't have time for internships. They don't have the resources. They're all hands on deck.
Yeah.
And I think another point I really want to echo, we are in the full blown market here. Companies don't have time for this. You may find more success in a bear market. In fact, you inevitably will find more success in a bear market. But then as a result of that, companies may not be hiring because they may not be getting as much revenue at the door. I think, that really covers everything I think I've seen. If there's anything else you want to, I think 3 things I would say. The risks are very high. Companies don't have the time or the resources to train people up. And in a bull market, things move very, it's just not going to be possible. So I think the only thing I can recommend is just build as many networks as you can. I think one thing that I did from an agency point of view is firms in space. I connected with the founders. I made sure I introduced myself and provided value before I ever asked for anything in return. And I would really echo those thoughts to the people in the chat here today and in your group. Build those connections now. And then, you never know where things may go in the future. Again, they see your content. If they follow you on LinkedIn, on Twitter, maybe even on YouTube, at a certain point, the tipping point will be they will reach out to you rather than you to ask.
Yeah, wonderful. I mean, I think those are excellent thoughts on that subject. And the other thought I have kind of on that, Manny, is, I mean, you probably have the same experiences. It feels like on Twitter, at least for me, people want to kind of connect. I mean, when I DM people, and I've DM'd a lot of people. I'm not gonna lie. I mean, I used to. So just a sidebar here. I used to be like a political. I used to work in politics many years ago, and in my community, I was going door to door. Like knocking on doors and making phone calls and stuff. So like, I have no shame when it comes to soliciting others. Either just to talk or ask them questions or learn, you know what I mean? And what I learned from that is that mostly people will be receptive to you, because they either want, they'll feel flattered and then they'll say, oh, someone wants to learn from my expertise, someone junior is asking me questions, or so on. And the ones that don't want to talk to you, that'll be clear, and you can just keep moving on and finding your own people in the space. Like I'm actually so glad I met you, Manny, because we seem to be on the same page. Kind of like being a happy warrior, thinking a bit unconventionally, putting good energy out, and when you reach out to people, you find your own people in the space, right? So and people answer back. People will give me tips. People will point me in other directions, and I've gotten certain little referrals from that too. So yeah, I think just go and be out there. Be entrepreneurial.
Very much so. I mean, to echo your thoughts, I think one of the great things in Web3 that really kind of separates it from a lot of other industries is people don't need to know what you look like. They don't need to know your educational background, status, even the country you live in. They don't really care. If English is your first language, maybe it's not theirs. If you reach out to someone on Twitter, the likelihood is that they're quite receptive. They may not be able to help you, but they build a connection. I mean, I'm looking back through our Twitter. I think the reason I started following you today is because you mentioned that Prime. So click the follow button, followed me back, which was very nice of you. And then you quite kindly reached out on DM to open the conversation, and this flowed to common quite quickly. So as with any area of life, shoot your shot, right? What's the worst that's going to do is
100%.
You never know where one conversation may take you tomorrow, next month, 2 years, 5, 10 years from now. So I really echo those thoughts. Shoot your shot on Twitter, reach out to people, even if you follow them, just like them, post on their tweets, retweet, quote tweet, whatever it might take. And it comes back to what I mentioned, both of, but also auditor firms. I have something called a top 100 list of companies I would like to work. And for you guys in the chat, I would really recommend doing something similar. Might not be as big as 100, but even if that's a top 5, top 10, follow them, like their stuff, find out who the founder is, follow his stuff, comment on him, and then eventually, just like I said, reach out. You'll be surprised how helpful people. I mean, one of the most friendly and nicest guys in this space is Patrick.
Yeah. Seems, I've never met him, but he seems.
He's very friendly. He's one of the coolest guys in this space. And, for someone who's or several companies in one, if you DM him, he's quite good at responding. And again, it's not like you're asking for, you're introducing yourself, and conversation will just flow from there. So, I guess the final thing I want to say on with this is it comes back to what I was saying. Like, don't be a dick, because if people have seen your profile and you may have never, they've seen a comment that you've posted and they don't like it, they will never interact with you no matter how much you might provide value to them. Whereas if you're quite open, quite friendly, quite helpful, they are very, very receptive to responding back to you. And this is a small space, so you don't really have to worry too much about someone being head of $1 billion company and never responding. I mean, I'll give a funny story. This was before I was doxxed. I remember reaching out when I podcast when I was looking for a job, and I remember getting like the founders of 3 of the top exchanges. I won't name them, but even still to this day, they're like 2 within the top 5 exchanges. Got the founders on a podcast, and this is unheard of, right? In the normal space, fintech, if you're messaging them, respond and say yeah, right? So I know this works, and I'm talking from my own experience. Shoot your shot, be good, friendly, and you will go in the right way.
Awesome. This is all great stuff. I mean, Manny, we've enjoyed so much having you on with us here. You're our inaugural coffee house guest, so congratulations. You have that also to add on to your record. Where I have one last question I'll ask you, but if you can add in as well, kind of like where can people reach you? How should they reach out to you?
Of course. I mean, following on from today's call, you guys have me in the Discord now. Just feel free to reach out to me. You have my Discord, DM me anytime. I will be very honest, I'm not always responding on Discord just because I have to mute a lot of stuff. nature of my role means I'm on calls a lot of the time. So if I have Telegram, Discord, everything else pinging off, but feel free to message me there. You can also connect with me on Twitter. Free. I will share that in the chat afterwards. Same with the Telegram. If you want to connect with me on email, it's manny@free.xyz. And for any of you guys who want to connect on LinkedIn, a little bit formal, I will drop all of my socials in the chat following on here from today. Just feel free to reach out to me anytime. I mean, I always do my best to respond back to any DMs I get, whether I can or not. And, if I can, I do my best to point you in the right direction.
Perfect. That's awesome. So my last question, just to finish it off, Manny, is kind of more personal for you. I mean, I'm curious to hear, like, how has your entrepreneurial journey been with CyberSec 3? Like, what have you kind of learned in the time that you've been doing it, and where do you want to see it go?
Interesting, because recruitment in Web3, they say hiring is broken, and I kind of extent here. From a founder's point of view, they don't know what. From a candidate's point of view, they go through many different interview rounds and they have that job security. So going from like more traditional Web3 recruitment to CyberSec 3 has very much been an eye opener for me. Firstly, like CyberSec hiring is non-negotiable. So whether the company has someone internal or external, the good thing is that they're actually acknowledging this. We're seeing a growth actually in CyberSec jobs. I think the other thing we've realized is as well is there is a great network of CyberSec people out there, but companies are not really tapping into this as much as they should do, because they put up a job advert, people may apply, but they may not be Web3 native, or if they are, they might not have the right skill set. So one of the challenges for me is really just been educating founders on finding the right type of people for their role. And I think the final thing, which has been great, is, and I think this will resonate with guys out security researching. Recruitment is a very, very competitive industry. Very similar to security research and auditing, especially for bug bounties. The bug bounty is out there in public. You're fighting against hundreds, if not thousands, of people to get that reward. And I think one thing that I've really liked, niching down into something, has really kind of took away a lot of the noise that I used to have, where same thing for me, I would see companies, hey, we're hiring for this client, hey, we have these roles. I think, what? I'm being left behind here. Why am I getting this work? Now niching it down into cybersecurity in Web3 has helped massively, because now the rest of the stuff is just noise. I don't care. I know that I'm making a difference. And I think the biggest challenge, but also has been the biggest reward, is hiring the right type of person for the right type of company. But the reward for this is knowing that I am actually making a long difference in Web3.
Yeah.
I would like to think that the difference I make is never hearing that project's name in the news saying they got hacked. So if I do that, and I know that that happens in the future, then I know that I've actually made a difference in this industry in one way.
That's wonderful. That's wonderful. That's a great way to end it, Manny. So thank you again. A big thanks from all of us here at Web3SecurityClan. If our talk makes it to YouTube, I'm not really sure how we're going to edit this up and post it. We'd like to, so people hear more about you and more about us. And we'll post all of your links and so on there as well. So for anyone listening, if you're a motivated junior auditor and you're looking to join a small community of fellow smart contract researchers, reach out. Feel free to reach out to me. And continue your journey alongside us, where you get to meet people like Manny and many others. And Manny, thanks so much. I mean, this has been absolutely wonderful. I really appreciated the time.